This is an amazingly simple exercise that uses a completely free tool that I'll share with you and is deeply impactful and meaningful. In fact, of the dozens and dozens and probably hundreds of different ideas and exercises and things that I've done with groups, what I'm about to share with you is one of people's absolute favorites. It's got two parts, and part number one uses this deck called We Engage Cards, which was a physical deck, but I've created a completely free and accessible to everybody version. You just go to weengagecards.com, and there's no email sign in, there's no login, you just immediately can access it. And part one's really simple. You see it on the screen right here. Choose a card that represents a future you would like to create. Behind this card is a bunch of other cards. The actual physical deck of We Engage Cards has quotes on one side and images on the other. And I had a mentor once that said, used to say that a choice of words is often a choice of worlds. And so the quote side is really powerful for that reason. For the image side, we know that our brains are wired to take visual data and experiential data and encode it into long-term memory. Whereas we tend to take language and numbers, take it into short-term memory, and then let it go. Right? It's the reason you might forget somebody's name, but you totally remember their face and could recognize them out of a lineup, right? So going back to here, part one, invite people to choose a card that represents a future you would like to create. You can invite people to use the image side or the quote side. For the sake of discussion, I'm gonna say let's use the quote side. And so you're gonna give people, let's say, a minute, maybe two, to go through and find a quote that represents a future they would like to create. Now, that's easy, pretty basic. Part two is where the power and the impact actually comes in. Part two is where we actually start to talk our way into the future. Right? We have this is really neat dynamic that our speaking and our listening actually create our future. Right? If you've ever gotten a job, you had a series of words that were exchanged that landed you that job. If you've ever had an insight or an idea, it was probably a combination of a variety of perspectives and experiences that you've had over your life that have brought you to that point where that idea came out. And so the idea here with this exercise, which, by the way, if you want a name for it, call it Forging a Future. And the idea here is to make it more likely that someone's ideal future actually comes out. And the reason I think this exercise is really powerful, typically when we think about the future, we think about like taking 2 to 3 days off site, strategic planning, coming out with all this big, long document of what to do next. And it's like, whew, there's a heaviness associated with that future. And Will, my late partner and co-author, used to keep a box of fortune cookies on his desk. And he did that because he would hold a fortune cookie out and remind people to not leave their fortune up to a cookie and rather to create it. And so when we prompt people to actually actively think about and put some words and perhaps some imagery to their future, the chances that it's going to happen go up a little bit. Now, if you're enjoying and loving part one already, I have an invitation for you. You're invited to a thing that I don't usually do, which is this program called Engage to Educate, specifically designed to help trainers, facilitators, workshop leaders, professional educators design for contribution, not just consumption, right? Because when we compete in the land of consumption, that's tough competition because you're competing with the likes of TikTok and Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and ChatGPT and whatever else, right? And so when we design for contribution, we create learning experiences that actually stick. And so if that's interesting to you, across my entire YouTube channel, I very rarely send an invite to a program or something like this, but this is one of those times. So here's your 15 seconds sponsored by Engage to Educate. You can check out a link in the description to that. Depending on when you're watching this video, there may be a wait list or a register your interest. But right now, at the time of publishing this video, the program's about to run in a couple weeks. Okay, part two of this exercise, very fun. This is where I'm going to invite people to write a letter to their future self. So if you're in person with a group and you wanted to spread a card deck, physical card deck, out and have people choose a card that represents a future they would like to create, you might have them write a physical letter. If you're remote with people, there's a really awesome site called futureme.org. This is just a customized version of that, which I'll link below because anybody can use this specific Future Me link. So I'll put that in the description as well. But essentially, it just allows you to send a distinctly different to your inbox letter to your future self. And the magic here is that simply writing about and talking about and thinking about a future you would like to create actually boosts the odds that it happens. Psychologists would call this the foot in the door technique, right? If you've ever come across the book Atomic Habits with James Clear, he talks about if you want to run a marathon, don't go online and search a plan for a 5K. Just take your running shoes, put them by your bed so you step on them in the morning. The foot in the door of just like, okay, I'm one step closer. I'm reducing the friction. I'm making it a little bit more likely because what psychologists have found is when somebody takes one step towards something, they're vastly more likely to complete it. And so simply inviting people to write a letter to their future self, they can pick the time that it gets delivered. And if you stack this on top of the exercise about writing a card, really, really useful. So let me share a really concrete example from my own experience where this happened. And by the way, you could create a QR code that goes right to weengagecards.com so that people could pull up the web app on their phone, right? There's no download. It's not an actual app. It's just a weengagecards.com. That's it. And so I've got the deck here. So for example, let's say I choose the quote, "Do not take life too seriously. You will never get out of it alive," which is a quote that I chose in particular because I tried to live out that future today on LinkedIn. This was really lovely. I made a post about exercise called Question Quest, and I thanked Justin Ross, a wonderful human and client of mine. And I got a message a little bit later that said, "Hey, I'm Justin Ross, but I'm not the Justin Ross you were intending to tag." So I totally, if you believe in this idea, made a mistake. And so in the spirit of not taking life too seriously, the way I remedied it, as opposed to editing the post, I just went down in the comments and I said, "Justin Ross." Of course, I tagged the wrong Justin Ross in my post, but not at least now. See, typos, mistakes are the portals of discovery. But now at least you know each other. May as well just add Justin Ross, and Justin Ross to the mix while we're at it. Hope all of you strangers and friends get at least a little bit of a chuckle out of this today. That moment, that specific comment is now a part of my material reality and a couple Justin Ross's material reality. Now, admittedly, someone didn't facilitate the Forging a Future exercise with me beforehand, but if I had chose that quote beforehand and it was a filter and a lens that I was looking at the world through, the chances that I'm going to type a comment like this go up, right? Context takes up a whole lot of space in our brain, and that's what these cards does for a group. It creates the context and the container for which people can speak about their future, share and exchange it clearly with others, gain some clarity on it, and perhaps make it a little bit more likely to happen down the line. Whew. That was all one take, no edits. Hopefully this was useful to you. If it was, there's about 287 more ideas across the channel. I'm Chad Littlefield. Have an awesome day.